My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 32 years old, and I work as an emergency room nurse in Denver, Colorado. I've spent years in the chaos of life and death situations, making split-second decisions that saved lives. But strangely, none of that ever seemed to matter to my family. In their eyes, I was always the disappointment, the one who drifted away from the family legacy. My father, Thomas Brooks, is the founder of one of the largest construction companies in Colorado. The Brooks name carries weight in Denver, and to my family. That's all that matters. Wealth, reputation, legacy. For as long as I can remember, my father had one vision for me that I would follow in his footsteps, work at Brooks & Co., and eventually marry someone who would elevate the family's influence. But that was never me. My brother, Brandon Brooks, was everything they wanted. He graduated with top honors, joined the company straight out of college, married Julia, a polished, perfect woman who fit seamlessly into their social circle, and now they have a son, Carter, the golden child. Brandon is the family's pride, the ideal son, the man who can do no wrong. And me, I was the one they barely tolerated, the artistic phase, the poor choices, the one who never quite fit their mold. I married Lucas when I was 23. He was a musician, a dreamer, someone who my father never respected because, in his words, real men build empires. They don't chase songs. Lucas wasn't perfect, but for a while, he made me feel seen, like I could live outside the Brooks blueprint. We had Mia when I was 24, and I thought we would build something beautiful together. But life rarely unfolds the way you imagine. Lucas left us when Mia was only 5, chasing his career and another woman across the country. After the dust settled, my family did what they always do. They reminded me of my failures. They said they warned me. They said I'd made my own bed. There was no comfort, no support, only judgment. I raised Mia on my own. I went back to school, got my nursing degree, and built a stable life for her and me. I'm proud of that. Mia is my whole world. So when I was offered the chance to lead a medical team at a prestigious hospital in Seattle, I knew I couldn't pass it up. It was the kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice a better life, a fresh start for Mia and me. But when I told my family I planned to move, the storm began. You're taking our granddaughter away from us. My mother's voice cracked in a way that felt less like heartbreak and more like entitlement. My father accused me of being selfish, of trying to erase my roots. Brandon and Julia piled on, guilt-tripping me with long speeches about family bonds and how Mia needed her cousin Carter. But for the first time in my life, I didn't back down. I was going to choose Mia. I was going to choose me. Even if my family couldn't accept it, even if they never would, I thought standing up for myself would be the end of it. I thought they would finally understand that I was serious about leaving. But in my family, nothing is ever that simple. 2 weeks after that explosive conversation, my father called me. His voice was unusually soft, lacking the stern edge I had grown up with. "Natalie," he said, "I've been thinking. Maybe we didn't handle things the right way. Before you leave, we'd like to spend some time together, just us as a family. How about a weekend trip to Aspen? It would mean a lot to your mother, to all of us." I was immediately suspicious. My father wasn't the kind of man who made peace offerings. Every gesture from him came with fine print I could never quite read. But then he added, "Mia deserves some happy memories with her grandparents before you go. We may not agree with your decision, but we don't want to part on bad terms." Those words made me hesitate. Mia had always been close to them, especially to her grandfather. Despite all the tension between me and my family, they had never shown Mia anything but affection. I wanted to believe that, maybe. Just this once. Their intentions were genuine. Mia's face lit up when I told her about the trip. She'd always wanted to see the snow-covered mountains, to try skiing, to ride a cable car above the treetops. "It'll be so much fun. Grandpa promised he'd teach me to ski. I swallowed my doubts and agreed. We drove up to Aspen the following Friday, a 3-hour trip winding through pine forests and frozen rivers. The family had reserved a large, private cabin deep in the mountains, far from the tourist resorts. My father claimed he wanted peace and privacy for our special weekend together. When we arrived, the air was biting cold, but the view was breathtaking. The snow blanketed everything in soft white layers, and the silence was so profound it almost felt staged. As we unloaded the SUV, I caught Brandon and my father exchanging glances, silent, calculated looks that stirred something uneasy inside me. I brushed it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I just didn't know how to trust them anymore. That evening, as we sat by the fireplace, the conversations were stiff but civil. My mother complimented Mia's new winter coat. Brandon teased her gently about how she would soon out-ski all of them. Julia, usually cold and distant toward me, made a point of asking Mia about school and her favorite subjects. It was nice, or maybe too nice. Later, I overheard Brandon and my father talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. When they noticed me approaching, they abruptly stopped. "Just planning tomorrow's ski route," Brandon said quickly, his smile too tight, too rehearsed. I wanted to press further, but Mia came bounding into the room, asking me to braid her hair before bed. I let it go. The next morning, my father suggested we take a short hike to a nearby summit with a panoramic view. "It's only an hour," he said. "Easy trail, well-marked. Mia will love it." I hesitated. I wasn't an experienced hiker, but he assured me the path was straightforward. The plan was simple after the hike. We'd return to the cabin for lunch and spend the afternoon skiing together. As we prepared to leave, Julia approached with a small box. Inside was a sleek GPS watch. "For Mia," she said sweetly. "It tracks her steps and location, perfect for adventures like today." I frowned. It seemed oddly specific, but she waved away my concerns. Kids get curious and wander off sometimes. "This way. You'll always know where she is. It's just a safety precaution." Mia loved it. She strapped it on immediately, fascinated by the digital map on the screen. I told myself not to be paranoid. Maybe Julia was genuinely thinking of Mia's safety. Before we set off, my father repeated the directions carefully. "It's a loop trail. You'll come back to the same clearing where we parked the snowmobiles. We'll wait for you here." Something about his tone didn't sit right with me. It was almost final. As Mia and I started up the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. My family had gone from furious to accommodating in record time. They had initiated this trip, organized every detail, and now they were sending us off alone while they stayed behind. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside. I wanted this to be a good memory for Mia. I wanted to believe, just once, that my family meant well. I didn't know then that this would be the last time I'd ever trust them. I wanted to believe they meant well. I wanted to believe this trip was their way of making peace. But deep down, something gnawed at me, a quiet warning I couldn't quite silence. The second morning dawned crisp and bright, the kind of morning that demanded adventure. My father, cheerful in a way that felt oddly rehearsed, suggested another family activity. "Let's all go for a short hike," he said as we gathered outside the cabin. "There's a scenic overlook not far from here. It'll give us a perfect view of the valley." Mia clapped her hands in excitement. Brandon and Julia chimed in enthusiastically, making it sound like the perfect plan. I told myself this was normal, that maybe I was overcomplicating something simple. Maybe they genuinely wanted this time together. We set out as a group, the 6 of us trudging through the snow-covered trail. The air was crisp, the sky cloudless, and Mia's laughter echoed through the trees as she ran ahead, kicking up puffs of powder. The hike wasn't difficult, gentle slopes, wide paths, and well-marked signs. About 45 minutes in, we reached the overlook, a rocky ledge where the entire valley stretched out before us in breathtaking silence. We stayed for a while, snapping photos and sipping hot cocoa from thermoses. It almost felt real, Almost. Then Brandon casually suggested, "Hey, Natalie, there's another viewpoint about an hour from here. It's supposed to have an even better view. You and Mia should check it out." I blinked. "Aren't we going together?" He shook his head. "Julia twisted her ankle a bit on the way up. We'll take her back to the cabin and wait for you there. No rush. We'll keep the fire going." Julia winced theatrically, as if to confirm the story. My father added, "It's an easy trail, just a straight path there and back. You won't get lost. You've got the GPS watch for Mia, just in case." Mia tugged at my sleeve. "Can we go?" "Mom, please." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, but their plan made logistical sense. The trail was marked. Mia had the GPS, and they promised to wait. I swallowed my unease and nodded. "We'll meet you back at the cabin by lunch," I said. "Take your time," my father replied, smiling in a way that felt too smooth, too deliberate. Mia and I walked the extra trail, enjoying the quiet and the soft crunch of snow beneath our boots. She told me stories about school, about her best friend Zoe, about how excited she was to start our new life in Seattle. Her trust in me, her joy in the moment it all anchored me. When we reached the second overlook, we sat together on a fallen log and watched the sun reflect off the snow-dusted peaks. It was beautiful, but I couldn't shake the growing knot in my stomach. I checked my watch almost noon. "Time to head back," I said, forcing a smile. Mia grabbed my hand and we started retracing our steps, following the same path through the woods. But when we reached the clearing where we'd left everyone, I stopped cold. The cabin was gone. The snowmobiles were gone. All the gear, the extra supplies, everything gone. Only the faint rectangular impressions of where the cabin once stood remained, slowly filling with new snowfall. Mia's brow furrowed in confusion. "Where is everyone?" I scanned the clearing, my heart thudding violently. It had to be a mistake. Maybe we had taken the wrong trail. Maybe they had gone to get help. Then I saw it. A plastic storage bin sat on the snow, too deliberately placed to be random. On top of it, a sheet of paper weighted down by a smooth rock. I snatched the note, my hands trembling as I unfolded it. In my father's handwriting, "You need to learn how to stand on your own. It's time you figured out what really matters." My breath hitched. Inside the bin, a battered tent with broken poles, a dented cooking pot, a malfunctioning radio, 2 bottles of water, 4 protein bars, and a small bundle of fire-starting materials. Just enough to last 2 days if we rationed carefully. They had left us, intentionally, in the middle of the wilderness. Mom Mia's voice quivered. Where did they go? Why did they leave us? I struggled to answer, my throat thick with disbelief and rising panic. I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. Mia knelt to examine the bin and found a folded note stuffed between a packet of matches. She handed it to me. It was written in Julia's handwriting. "Natalie, I hope this teaches you what you've always refused to see: family as everything. You can't just walk away from us. You don't get to break this family apart without consequences." My blood went cold. They had planned this. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a desperate lesson. This was deliberate cruelty, a calculated punishment for my decision to leave. They thought if they abandoned me here, I would break. I would beg. I would crawl back to them on their terms. They didn't know me at all. But out here, in the biting cold and endless white, I would soon learn I didn't know myself either. Not yet. Not fully. The first thing I did was force myself to breathe. Panic would kill us faster than the cold. I knelt beside the plastic bin, mentally cataloging everything: one battered tent, barely usable, 2 half-empty water bottles, 4 protein bars, a broken radio that clicked but produced no sound. Useless. I knew we had a window, maybe 2 days if we rationed carefully. "Mia, help me set up the tent," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded. though her small hands trembled as she picked up the cracked poles. The tent was barely functional. One side sagged where the frame wouldn't hold, and cold wind crept in through the gaps. It would not keep us warm, but it was better than nothing. Once the tent was up, I worked to start a fire with the kindling they'd left. After several attempts, the flames finally caught, a weak, sputtering light against the vast, frozen wilderness. "We need a signal," I murmured. I gathered pine needles and damp moss to create thick, white smoke. A dark column rose into the sky, but before I could feel any relief, the clouds above thickened ominously. Within an hour, snow began to fall heavily, smothering our fragile signal. The storm came fast, angry and suffocating. The fire flickered under relentless snowfall until it died completely, leaving us in the cold silence. I wrapped Mia in our thinnest emergency blanket and held her close as the temperature dropped. "We'll be okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. That night, Mia's breathing changed, shallow, uneven. Her skin felt hot beneath my touch, her face flushed despite the freezing air. "Mom," she croaked, her voice thin and distant. "I don't feel good." I pressed my hand to her forehead. Burning. She had a fever. No, not now. I rummaged through the bin again, hoping, praying for something useful. A half-empty pack of children's fever tablets expired by 2 years. I gave her a tablet anyway. It was all I had. I tucked her deeper into the blankets, speaking to her constantly to keep her awake. I told her stories from when she was little, about the time she first learned to ride a bike, about the trip to the ocean where we chased waves until sunset. Anything to anchor her to me, to this moment. In the morning, the fever had worsened. I had to find firewood. We needed heat. I told Mia to stay in the tent, tucked under all the layers we had, and I ventured out alone into the gray-white haze. Snow crunched beneath my boots, the cold biting through my jacket. I kept moving, scouring the ground for dry sticks, anything that would burn. Then I saw them. Tracks, large, fresh, and circling. Wolf tracks. I crouched and scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, nothing sounded. But I knew we weren't alone. I grabbed as much wood as I could carry and hurried back to the tent, my pulse racing with a dread I couldn't swallow. When I reached Mia, I forced myself to smile. "I've got more wood," I said, working quickly to restart the fire. But I kept glancing over my shoulder, waiting for shadows to emerge. By afternoon, the sky darkened again, heavy with the threat of more snow. Mia's fever wasn't breaking, and her cough worsened. I wrapped my arms around her, whispering that everything would be okay, even though I could barely see a way forward. A sound, a low, guttural growl rippled through the air behind me. I turned. A wolf. Not alone. Another appeared to the left, then a third, their pale eyes glinting through the falling snow. "Don't move," I whispered to Mia, who clung tightly to my jacket. I grabbed a burning stick from the fire, waving it wildly, shouting, desperate to seem bigger than I was. The wolves hesitated but didn't retreat. I knew we couldn't stay here. They would wait us out. They would come back when the fire died. The scent of our food, what little we had, was already in their noses. "We have to move." I told Mia. Now. But when I stood, a patch of ice hidden beneath the snow gave way under my foot. I fell hard, pain exploding through my ankle. The crack wasn't audible, but I felt it deep, a sharp, twisting agony that told me something was seriously wrong. I gritted my teeth and forced myself up, but my ankle couldn't bear the weight. Mia's wide eyes brimmed with tears. "Mom, I'm fine. I lied. We're going to walk. I just need your help." Mia, my brave, fierce daughter, slid under my arm, her small frame bearing my weight as we stumbled away from the clearing. Each step sent white-hot pain shooting up my leg, but stopping wasn't an option. We had to leave the fire, the tent, everything. I pulled the GPS watch from Mia's wrist. desperate now to use the one thing Julia had unknowingly given us the one mistake in their plan. I scrolled through the stored locations, my frozen fingers trembling until I found it a breadcrumb trail. The watch had recorded the route from the snowmobiles, and part of the outbound track still lingered. It was our only hope. "We're going to follow this," I said, showing Mia the tiny blinking line on the screen. "It might lead us back." She nodded, wiping her tears, her resolve solidifying in the shadow of danger. In the fading light, we turned our backs on the tent and the wolves lurking beyond it. We would not wait to be hunted. We would find our way out. We would not wait to be hunted. We would find our way out. That was the only thought keeping me upright as Mia and I trudged through the snow, step after agonizing step, following the faint GPS breadcrumb trail on her watch. The cold bit into every inch of me, but the sharpest pain came from my ankle. It was swollen, stiff, each step like a blade twisting through bone. I gripped a broken branch as a makeshift crutch, forcing my weight onto it, determined not to slow Mia down. The trail the GPS recorded wasn't a straight path. It wound through the trees in strange loops, as if Brandon had intentionally taken the longest, most confusing route to the snowmobiles. We followed it carefully, retracing our steps in reverse, marking trees with strips of fabric torn from the tent we'd abandoned. Mia's face was pale, her breathing still ragged, but her resolve never cracked. She held the GPS watch tightly, checking it every few minutes. "We're getting closer," she would whisper, though neither of us really knew how far we still had to go. After what felt like hours, we stumbled upon a narrow, well-worn path. It wasn't on the GPS, but I recognized it from the first day the ranger trail my father had briefly mentioned. I remembered his words now, thrown out so casually. There's a ranger station somewhere along the main trail. Somewhere. Somewhere could still mean miles. We're following this. I told Mia, "It's faster than the GPS route." She nodded without hesitation. We moved as quickly as we could. I leaned heavily on the branch, dragging my injured leg, focusing only on keeping Mia in my line of sight. The forest around us had grown eerily quiet. The snowfall had lessened, but the silence was not comforting. It was the silence of predators waiting. A low growl shattered that quiet. Mia froze, her eyes wide with terror. A lone wolf emerged from the trees behind us. Not part of the pack, this one was larger, older, its fur streaked with gray, its yellow eyes locked onto us. "Run, Mia," I said, pushing her forward. "But Mom, now follow the trail. Don't look back." She obeyed, sprinting ahead, the GPS watch still clutched in her hand. I turned to face the wolf, waving my stick and shouting, hoping to scare it off. It didn't flinch. I backed away, but it advanced steadily, each step closing the distance. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might burst, but I forced myself to stand tall, to be loud, to make myself appear bigger even as fear clawed at me. When it lunged, I swung wildly, catching it across the snout. It yelped and backed off briefly, giving me seconds to retreat. I kept moving backward, dragging my injured leg, staying just enough ahead to prevent another charge. I could hear Mia's voice faintly in the distance, shouting my name. "Mom, I found a hill. I'm going to make smoke." She remembered. I'd told her that smoke was the best way to signal in winter, that wet leaves and pine needles made the thickest plumes. The wolf stalked me relentlessly, pacing, testing. I grabbed a handful of snow and hurled it toward the animal, screaming again, forcing it to keep its distance. Then, rising over the trees, I saw it, a thin, dark line of smoke curling into the sky. Mia had done it. Please, someone, see it. I didn't know how far she'd gone, how close help might be. But that signal was our last hope. The wolf crept closer, baring its teeth. I threw another branch, shouted louder, anything to keep it away a little longer. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the trees. "Hello, is someone out there?" I spun toward the sound, my heart leaping into my throat. Two figures emerged, wearing bright orange jackets, rangers. One of them carried a flare gun, the other a radio. The wolf vanished into the trees the moment the voices broke the standoff. "Over here," I cried, my voice hoarse and cracking. I fell to my knees, my body finally giving out. The rangers rushed to my side, one stabilizing my injured ankle, the other quickly scanning the area. "Where's your daughter?" one asked urgently. "She followed the trail," I rasped. "She made the smoke." They radioed their team, sending coordinates. Within minutes, another ranger found Mia, exhausted but alive, still adding wet pine needles to the fire she had built. She had done it perfectly. When they brought her to me, she collapsed into my arms, both of us sobbing uncontrollably. They transported us by snowmobile to the ranger station. Warmth, clean water, and safety surrounded us at last, but my mind remained sharp with purpose. I told the rangers everything: the GPS data, the letters they left, the entire calculated plan. The ranger in charge frowned deeply. "You're saying your family abandoned you here, deliberately?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "They planned to leave us. They wanted to break me." The rangers called the police immediately. I handed over the notes, Mia's GPS watch with the saved route, and all the evidence I could gather, every breadcrumb, every thread of their cruelty. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would beg for their forgiveness. But we survived, and now they would answer for what they had done. They thought I would beg for their forgiveness. They thought they could leave me broken in the snow and return as saviors when they decided I'd learned my lesson. But they miscalculated the one thing they never understood. I didn't need them to survive. My father, Brandon, and Julia were arrested at their estate the same day the rangers called the police. They had planned to rescue us 3 days later, expecting to find a woman desperate, starving, and ready to crawl back into their version of family. Instead, they were greeted by sheriff's deputies with warrants in hand. The investigation was swift and brutal. The evidence was undeniable handwritten notes, the GPS logs from Mia's watch, and text messages recovered from Brandon's phone outlining the schedule of their so-called intervention. There was no miscommunication, no accident. It was premeditated. At the trial, they sat just feet from me, but they looked smaller than I'd ever seen them, stripped of the control they always wielded like a weapon. My father's jaw was clenched. Brandon's expression flickered between arrogance and panic, and Julia avoided my gaze entirely. The charges were severe felony child endangerment, reckless endangerment, and attempted involuntary manslaughter. When the verdict came, it landed like the sound of a door locking behind them, guilty on all counts. My father was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Brandon and Julia received 3 years each. Restraining orders were issued, permanent, untouchable. They would never be allowed near Mia or me again. When asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood and faced them. I didn't speak out of vengeance. I spoke because the truth no longer frightened me. "Family," I said, my voice steady, "is not supposed to control you. Family is not supposed to hurt you and call it love. Family is supposed to be where you are safest. You have never understood that." My father opened his mouth to respond, but I had already turned away. There was nothing more to say. Seattle welcomed us like the fresh start it promised to be. I rebuilt my life, not as a nurse chained to the expectations of others, but as the founder of a nonprofit that offered wilderness survival training and support groups for women who had been emotionally manipulated and controlled by their families. Mia and I became part of a community where we didn't have to explain or justify who we were. We belonged because we chose each other, not because of bloodlines. Mia thrived over the years. She not only healed, but she grew strong, confident, and fiercely independent. By the time she was 15, she became the youngest certified survival instructor in our organization, a symbol of what resilience can become when it is nurtured, not crushed. Every year, Mia and I kept our promise. We returned to the wilderness, not to relive the past, but to reclaim what had been stolen from us. We built our own fires, set up our own camps, and sat under skies that no longer felt threatening. One autumn, as we packed up our tent after another long weekend, Mia asked, "Do you ever think about them?" I paused, cinching the straps of my backpack. "Sometimes," I admitted. but not the way I used to. I don't miss them. I miss the idea of what family should have been. Mia adjusted her gear and smiled softly. We built the real thing. I looked at her then, standing tall against the tree line, her face steady, her steps sure. She didn't need my protection the way she once did. She had become her own force untouchable, and so had I. I no longer needed to prove anything to them, to anyone. The battles I fought were no longer about being seen or accepted. They were about choosing my path and walking it without permission. That was freedom. I secured the final buckle of my pack, took one last look at the clearing where we had made our stand, and then I turned away not in anger, not in grief, but in quiet certainty. Some doors don't need to be slammed. Some simply need to be closed. And when I walked away, I understood, finally and fully, dignity cannot be taken away. True worth doesn't need to be granted. It already exists. I carried mine with me, with every step forward.